In the autumn of 1879, in the German town of Ulm, a child was born who would one day redraw the map of human understanding. But if you had met young Albert, you might not have guessed it. He was a quiet boy, so quiet that his family worried. He didn't speak until he was 3 years old, and even then, he would mutter sentences under his breath before saying them aloud, as if testing their weight. His parents wondered if something was wrong. They didn't know yet that some minds simply take longer to find their voice. When Albert was 5, his father gave him something that would change everything: a simple compass. He held it in his hands and watched the needle swing, always pointing north, pulled by something he couldn't see. That invisible force fascinated him. He couldn't touch it, couldn't taste it, couldn't hear it, but it was real. It was there. And from that moment, he understood that the world was full of hidden truths, waiting for someone curious enough to find them. But curiosity wasn't something the schools of his time encouraged. In Munich, where his family moved when he was young, Albert faced a system built on memorization and discipline. Rote learning. Repetition. Rules without reasons. He asked questions his teachers couldn't answer, and they didn't appreciate that. One teacher told him directly, "You will never amount to anything." Albert didn't fit their mold, and they couldn't see past it. He withdrew into himself, finding comfort in mathematics and music, in the clear language of numbers and the emotional clarity of Mozart. His family's business failed, and they moved to Italy, leaving Albert behind to finish his education. He lasted less than a year. The loneliness, the rigid system, the feeling of being trapped, it became unbearable. He dropped out at 15 and followed his family to Milan. For a while, he wandered. He read philosophy, hiked through the Alps, and thought about the universe. But eventually, he knew he needed a path forward. He applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, one of Europe's finest institutions. And he failed the entrance exam. He passed the math and science sections brilliantly, but his general knowledge fell short. It was a setback, but not a defeat. The school recognized his potential and suggested he finish his secondary education nearby. He spent a year at a small Swiss town, in a school that actually encouraged independent thinking and thrived. When he reapplied, he was accepted. Zurich changed him. For the first time, he was surrounded by people who thought the way he did. He fell in love with physics, with the deep questions about light and space and time that no one had answered. He also fell in love with Mileva Maric, the only woman in his class, a brilliant physicist from Serbia. They bonded over their shared passion, their late-night discussions, their sense that they were chasing something bigger than grades. But Albert was never a model student. He skipped lectures, preferring to study on his own, to follow his curiosity wherever it led. His professors weren't impressed. When he graduated, he couldn't get a research position. He spent 2 years tutoring, struggling, applying for jobs that never came. It was a humbling time. The young man who dreamed of unlocking the universe couldn't even unlock a laboratory door. Finally, a friend helped him get a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. To most people, this would have been a detour, a compromise. To Albert, it became something else. He called it his thinking lab. The work was steady but undemanding, leaving his mind free to wander. He would sit at his desk, reviewing patent applications, and in the spaces between, he would think. About light. About motion. About the nature of reality itself. The patent office gave him something academia never could: time to think without pressure, to let his ideas breathe. And in 1905, those ideas exploded into the world. Historians call it his miracle year. 26 years old, still working at the patent office, Albert published 4 papers that changed everything. One explained the photoelectric effect, showing that light behaves as both a wave and a particle, a discovery that would later earn him the Nobel Prize. One explained Brownian motion, proving the existence of atoms beyond any doubt. And one introduced the special theory of relativity, which redefined our understanding of space and time. Tucked within that paper was a small equation that would become the most famous in history: E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. It suggested that matter and energy are two sides of the same coin, that the universe is far stranger and more connected than anyone had imagined. The scientific world took notice. Slowly at first, then overwhelmingly. Albert became a professor, then a global icon. He toured the world, lecturing to packed halls, meeting presidents and kings. But fame never changed his core. He still dressed simply, spoke gently, and preferred a quiet afternoon with his violin to any grand ceremony. When a young girl asked him for homework help, he wrote back personally. When a child wrote to him about struggles in math, he replied, "Do not worry about your difficulties in mathematics. I can assure you, mine are still greater." But the world was changing around him. War came. The rise of Nazism in Germany, where he still held positions, forced him to flee. He was a prominent Jew, and his theories were denounced as Jewish physics. His home was raided, his books burned. In 1933, he sailed to America and never looked back. He settled in Princeton, at the Institute for Advanced Study, where he spent the rest of his life. The war followed him. A letter arrived, signed by other physicists, warning that Germany might be developing an atomic bomb. They urged Albert to write to President Roosevelt. He did. That letter set in motion the Manhattan Project, though Albert himself never worked on it. When the bombs fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he felt deep regret. He had opened a door, and humanity had walked through it toward destruction. He spent his final years advocating for peace, for nuclear disarmament, for a world where science served life, not death. He kept working until the end, chasing a unified theory, a single framework that would explain everything. He never found it. But that was never the point. The point was the chase, the curiosity, the refusal to stop asking why. On April 17, 1955, Albert lay in a hospital bed, holding a sheet of paper, working on a speech for Israel's 7th anniversary. He jotted down a few final equations. The next morning, he was gone. They didn't embalm him. They didn't build a monument. They cremated him quietly, and his ashes were scattered in a secret location. But his mind, that restless, curious, stubborn mind, remains with us. It lives in every student who looks at the night sky and wonders. In every child who holds a compass and feels the pull of something invisible. In every person who refuses to accept the world as it's given and insists on asking, what if? He once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world." He lived that truth. And in doing so, he reminded us all that the greatest discoveries don't come from following the rules. They come from questioning them.